Okay, welcome back. So this is part two of our lesson for this week, and in this part, we're going to go over the basics of the level editor for Unreal Engine, and kind of get into um, the basic pipeline of how you create 3D levels with the engine. So this the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to explain what's going on in our editor. There's a bunch of different panels and things. It may look a little similar to Unity, um, but some of the mechanics are a little different. So first off, we have our viewport. If you right click, if you hold your right mouse button and drag your mouse, you can pan around the scene. Um, all of your movement in the viewport in Unreal is done while holding right click. So this will let you pan. If you use WAS and D, you can move your camera around like this, and it will follow just kind of like you would in a video game. Um, if you want to zoom in and out with your camera, you can use your middle mouse button to scroll or middle scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And if you left click on anything, it will select the object in the scene. So I'm clicking on different things here. And that's the basics of this. Basically, if you were to move around in this space and you wanted to, say, move this cube, you could click on it. You'll get the widget, the transform tools, very similar to in Unity, where you can drag on one of these arrows to move the object around your scene. And if you use the E key, that will allow you to rotate. So you hit E and then you can rotate the object. If you hit R, it'll allow you to scale it up and down. And if you drag on any individual handle here, it will scale in just that direction. And then in the center will allow full scale. Same with rotation. If you drag on one of these directions here, you can scale or you can rotate in that direction. And finally, if you hit the W key, that'll bring you back to your translation tool, so you can move with the arrow keys here or with the arrows here. And then if you hit the center part of the widget, you can drag it around anywhere. Also, if you hit like these little right angle squares between two of the arrows, two of the vertices, and drag, it'll drag in a combination of those directions. So that is basic movement of objects in Unreal. Next up, let's talk about the outliner. So over here on the right side, by default, these are tabs that you can move around and dock anywhere in your editor, however you want to. I keep my outliner. I would like to keep it above my. Let me put it back. Oops. We'll drag everything back here. I'd keep my outliner in the top right corner where it starts. It's just easy for me to see. But here we'll have all of your different objects in your scene. So by default, this level has a bunch of things in folders. So like this block one is if I were to click and then shift and then click every object in that folder, that will show you that's everything in this block, and then this is this block, so on and so forth. You can select objects in your viewport by clicking on the object in the outliner. Also in the outliner, if you click on an object, you can, I'll get to the details panel in a second, but in the details panel, it will show you all of the information for that object. You can also see in the outliner, it'll tell you what type of object it is. So pretty much everything in this scene is like static meshes, but there are also different lighting and post-processing effects here in the lighting folder. I'll get to that in a second as well. And then there's also the player start. This is Unreal's marker for when you start your level. This is where the player will spawn in. So if I hit this play button up here to play the level, I spawn in right here, exactly where the player start is. Moving down to the details panel. So this is where all of the information for our assets in the scene will be, and where you can edit things. So the first thing, if you click on an object, you'll see kind of this hierarchy of things inside that object. Different actors in Unreal can have multiple things parented into them. So you'll have the parent actor, and then you'll have different components that are children of that actor. But if we were to just use the root, the actual parent here, we can see we have a bunch of different things we can do. The transform panel here is just the same as it is in Unity, where if you want to use the widget handles to move things around visually, you can, but you can also use these to change um, information for its location, rotation, and scale, and it will move things around based on that. Um, Mobility is it's more of how the engine sees objects and how they can interact in the scene. If something is static, it does not move, and it can't be changed in game. So you use static objects for things like this block here. It's not going to move. It's a part of the scenery. But like these cubes, they're set to movable, so they can actually be moved around. And actually, if I were to play the scene here and just run over and run into these, see they move. Stationary allows things to be changed, but not changed during the game, but not moved. So if things are spawning in and out, or being affected by the world, say a day-night cycle, you can use stationary. Next up, we have the actual information for the mesh. So I have this cube highlighted here, and this will tell me that the static mesh for that cube is this SM_chamfer cube. If I wanted to change that, I can use this dropdown, or I can drag something into this thumbnail there. So say I want this to be a couch. If I choose the couch, now it is a couch. Then under the advanced tab, you can change a bunch of other stuff. For this one, it's just the blocking volume, the way that you run into the mesh. That's not that important for most of the static meshes that kind of already have collision baked into them. And then we have materials. So materials are the way that meshes have color, or like the type of material that they are. So this couch, for instance, it has like a metal frame. That's all baked into the material itself. I'll go into materials a little bit later, but basically, if you decided you didn't want this material on this couch, you could drag a new material into the thumbnail here, or you can choose, say, that one, and it'll change what the couch looks like. If you hit this back arrow here, it'll reset to its default in case you mess up with something. That's really useful. The final thing that we want to talk about in the details panel is if you have an actor that is not just a static mesh. So I'm going to see, let's go with this directional light. You'll have different things. So lights will have a light panel where you can change the details of how the light works. They'll have things like rendering and light mass and things like that. All these different options you can change. If you have something that as an actor is a blueprint, then the blueprint will have a bunch of different options in it as well. And what the player start has, it has a lot of the things that we want to talk about. So your different actor options here, as well as how input is received, the way physics works. All of this is all in your details panel. The final thing on this right side is the world settings tab. If you click on this, this is how the world itself is computed. So the important things here for what we're doing are, I might get into a bit later. It's kind of like an advanced tip kind of thing, getting into level streaming and persistent levels. But for right now, the only thing that you'd have to worry about when you're looking at all of this, because a lot of this is gameplay specific, you can look at your game mode. So the game mode will dictate how everything plays. So if I look at all of the stuff for this, my selected game mode is the BP underscore third person game mode. This is the default one that's set for the third person template when we created our project. This will tell us the default pawn class, which is BP underscore third person character. That is our character's class. That is the pawn that we control in the game. It'll tell us the class for our HUD, the class for our player controller, our game state, player state, and spectator class. Game state, player state, and spectator class are for multiplayer, but the important ones are your pawn class and your player controller class, because that will tell you what blueprint is controlling the character and where you want to put things to control your character in game, and then also what things affect your character. So your pawn class is filled with stuff to actually affect the character. If I were to click on this little folder here, it'll navigate to that, and I'll explain the content browser in a second. But if we open the third person character blueprint up, this is all of the stuff that is affecting the character itself. So input mapping, camera, movement, and jumps. So we would put things that would affect the character itself in here, and then the player controller class. If we look at that one, if I can click on it, actually maybe there's not a player controller set up here by default. So if we made a player controller class, you could do things like control how the player communicates with the game, how the player communicates with the server in an online game, things like that. A lot of that we don't have to deal with level design, but I wanted to mention it so that you kind of know how to navigate the space. Next up, down here at the bottom, we have the content browser. This is similar to the content browser in Unity, in that everything is set up in folders, and everything that we want we can click into and navigate through with these drop-down arrows to find what we're looking for. So everything that you kind of want to start with, if you go all the way to the root folder here, to the all folder, you'll see content and engine. The engine folder is stuff that is built into the Unreal Engine. So we go through here, we have C++ classes, and then we have a bunch of built-in shaders and sounds and landscape things. We won't have to navigate too much through that. But if you go back to all and you go to your content folder, this is where you put stuff that you want to put into your game. So by default, we have characters, level prototyping, starter content, third person. If you open up characters, you'll see we have these mannequins. If we look at the meshes, this is an Unreal mannequin. This is the Manny and Quinn. These are the defaults, as well as their skeleton and their animations and all that stuff. This is all by default, and this is where you would put stuff if you wanted to add characters or, say, objects to be put into your scene. Third person folder here is all of the things from the world settings, all of your blueprints and stuff that affect the third person template when we installed that. And then the starter content was all of that starter stuff I was talking about, where you have, this is something that you'll probably want to use quite a bit. So like if we go into the architecture section, you can see we have walls and floors and things. And if I were to drag this wall into the scene, this is right here, and it's set and scaled properly to just be used in the scene. And these are just your basic pieces of geometry and things to create your scenes. Same is true with like props. That's where the couch came from. We got some lights and statues and doors and things. But we're going to start here in the content folder, and we're going to add to it. Next up, the next thing real fast, this one you won't have to worry about, and might not even be by default when you open up your engine the first time, is the output log. It will tell you all of the different functions that are happening in the engine. There's a lot of stuff here. Red is bad, red is errors, yellow is warnings. But this is just to tell you if something goes wrong, you can read through the output log and see what it is. It's far more complicated than just creating a level. I have to restart my recording real fast, so be right back. All right, so we've talked about what's in the content browser and the outliner and details panel. Up here at the top of our outliner, we have the different kind of modes that we're going to be using to create our levels. First off, we have the save button. Make sure that you save constantly. Very important. and then the browse. So um, if you have a thing selected, so I have this door selected. If I click this folder button, it'll browse. Oh no, sorry. In the outliner, it'll browse to the tab that you're on. So right now I'm in the third person map. It'll browse to that level. But if you're in a specific blueprint, it'll browse to whatever that blueprint is. And then we have the mode options here. So this is the first thing that we're going to be using. So keep that in mind. But this will let you choose between like how you interact with the viewport. If you're selection mode, lets you select and move things around. Landscape lets you create a landscape, foliage, paint foliage, so on and so forth. This button here will allow you to add things to your project very quickly. So if I wanted to add, say, a basic cube, I can click on that and it'll drop it right into our viewport. This is the blueprint for our level. So if we drop this down, we can open up our level blueprint, which will allow us to edit things that happen in runtime when you open the level. This is a cinematic thing. We don't have to worry too much about that. And then this dock here allows us to test and play our level. So if you click the play button, like I showed before, it'll start the game. If you click the three dots here, you can choose kind of how the game, how your uh, play screen is opened, whether it's inside of the viewport. You can open it up in a new window, launch it standalone, which will actually launch the game as its own application. So it's kind of like a mini package. It'll let you see what the game looks like when you're running it in as a standalone exe file in on your computer. And then simulate will do all of the different things that are supposed to happen at runtime without actually having you play the game. So if I click on simulate, you'll see, well, that one kind of fell out into nothing. But you'll see that I'm technically playing the game, but I'm not playing as a character. This will allow me to try things like see how like that couch completely disappeared. If I were to drag, say, this cube up into the air and I wanted to see how gravity worked and I clicked on simulate, it'll do things like play the gravity. Like that couch disappearing into nothing. I guess that couch didn't actually have collision set up on it. Anyway, and then finally, the platforms thing here, this is for building. We don't have to worry about this too much, but when you want to go and build out your project, you click on this and then choose the platform that you want to package the project in. I think the last thing that I want to talk about in this window is these tools here. These are all of your tools just in button form. So, like I said, if you hit the E key, you'll see it goes to rotate. The R key goes to scale, and the W key goes to translate. This is just to select, so you can get rid of your widget and just select things. But you can click on these buttons if you don't want to use the hotkeys on your keyboard. These things are for this is the coordinate system. So this will tell you how your objects work in local space. You don't have to worry about clicking on using that at all. This is controlling snapping. And then these three buttons here are the scale at which things are snapping to your grid. So this one is for snapping for dragging stuff. So if you're moving things around, you may notice that as I move things, it kind of snaps. If I were to change this to snap, say to 500, drag, it snaps 500 units away. By default, it's set at 10, and if you want to turn it off, it gives you actual fine control. As you can see in the location down here, very fine control as to where you want to place things. Same is true with this. This is just the angle that things snap at. So if I were to rotate this, it's going to rotate 10 degrees every time I rotate. But if I were to turn that off, I can rotate very fine decimals of degrees. And then this is for scaling. This will scale, snap your scale to 0.25 times every time you scale, all the way up to 10 if you want to get really, really big real fast or very small. I usually just turn off the scaling because it's easier for me. And then the camera here is your camera speed. So if I pump my camera speed up, I will zoom real fast. If I pump it all the way down. I will zoom very slow. Very useful for getting things to getting into like really fine crevices and things when you're trying to get up real close to things to line things up or whatever. Um, or if you're navigating a very large map, getting across it very quickly. All right, so that's the basics of the viewport and the editor. Only other thing that you may need to take a look at is under the edit menu, you have project settings. So in project settings, you'll have all of these different options. You might, depending on what you decide to do, if you want to add plugins and things, you might need to go through here and edit some of the settings to make it work properly. But basically, if I were to say I was using say I was packaging the project, I want to make sure that there's a couple of things set up. So if I click on maps and modes, this will set up kind of what map I open up in it when I start up the editor here, and also what map opens up when you start the game. And I can change those things. I can change my default game mode. I can change the things that affect the game mode in here. And then if I wanted to say add platforms that I wanted to build the game out on, I can click on this and change that. And this is all sorts of things. I mean, there's literally thousands of options within here. I wouldn't mess with any of this unless you either knew what you wanted to mess with, or you were using, say, a plugin or whatever that wanted to access these things and you needed to get to it. I don't think that we're going to be using too many plugins unless you feel like you need to, which go for it. Experimentation is, I think, oh God, I broke it. No, whatever. We don't need this. I'm going to hit delete to delete that. All right, so we want to start our own level. We want to create a new level, and we want to build it from scratch. So I'm going to go into our content folder, and what I'm going to do is if I right-click in here, I can create a level. So this level I'm going to just call map design test. Sure. And then if I click into this level, so one thing you'll notice is if you've changed anything in the level you're currently in, if you double click on the level itself, it'll ask you to save the content that you did in the previous level, because it closes down the level file and opens up a new one. So you want to make sure that if you did anything that you save it before you open up your new level. All right, so here in the level, or in the new level that we just created, there's nothing in our outliner and there's nothing in our viewport. So we need to do a couple of things to start to get our level ready to be edited. Hit my microphone there. So the first thing we want to do is if we go to our add drop down here, we want to add a directional light. So we go down to lights, we go to directional light. So this is our sun. This will determine time of day and the direction in which the sun is pointing. You don't have to move it. You don't have to do anything with it. It just needs to be in the project. The next one we want to add, if we go down to visual effects, is our sky atmosphere. That gives us the sky. And now you see, we can see the sun. We have what is starting to become a level or a world. And again, like I said, I don't know if it'll affect it with just the sky atmosphere, but if I were to drag this around, yeah, it's not with just, I need to have the volumetric fog. Next one we want to add under visual effects is volumetric cloud. This gives us our clouds. And also, oh no, I've lost my widget. As another point, if I click on my, I believe now my directional light should affect things. Yeah, see how you can rotate your directional light, kind of change your time of day, change the position of the sun in the sky, and that'll give you control of whether or not you want to have day, night, dawn, dusk, so on and so forth in your level. The next one we want to add is under visual effects, the exponential height fog. Yes, there you go. That gives us everything else in the world and kind of connects our horizon with our sky. That's important because if you if your world is super small, if you're like down here, this is where I see things in the game, but I can see out into the horizon. You want to make sure that there are no sight lines that kind of break the immersion that you're not actually in a game. Um, and again, like I said, it doesn't matter where these objects are; they affect the entire world. So, what I usually do is I'll select all of them and I will kind of combine them together. So we'll just bam like that. Um, and then if I need, say, the directional light, we can drag that out a little bit so it's easier for us to see. But again, these things don't actually affect where they are doesn't actually affect anything. I'm also going to reset our rotation for our sun just to make sure that we have a nice midday scene. So now our sun's right above us. Um, so that is the start. Now we have kind of our world bubble here. And this map can go on infinitely if you want it to. Um, as you can see, I can just kind of like go on infinitely, go on up and down. The only thing that you have to be aware of is this grid. Oh gosh, I'm moving too fast now. Okay, and let's drop it back down. See, this grid here is the floor. So you want to make sure that you know that anything that is above the grid will be above ground, and anything that's below the grid will be below the surface. So you want to make sure that if you're doing something that is um, underground, that you keep that relevant to the grid here itself. All right. Next up, I reset the recording again, but next up, we're going to get into doing some landscaping. Be right back. Okay. So we have our sky, and our different pieces of our horizon. Our sun's in the sky, and we have light. Um, the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to do landscaping. So we're going to create around map is going to be on. So up here in select where it says selection mode, you're going to drop that down and go to landscape mode. This is going to open up a couple of things. We have this new panel here. We also have this green um, grid. The grid has become green, and if I zoom out a bit, you can see this has a boundary set up in it. By default, this is set up to this size, and you can change it depending on how big you want your level to be. So I'm going to do something really small just to be quick about it. But what we can do here, so the first thing we're doing is we are under manage, and then we are doing a new landscape. So we want to make sure that all is selected. And from here, we can do a couple of things. So the material for our landscape, if we want to add a material specifically for this, we can add it here. If I wanted to, I'm going to just go ahead and we'll use this grass material. Um, that um, that will affect kind of the material that we use that will cover the ground. The next thing we want to do is down here in the section size. By default, it's set to 63 by 63 quads, which if we were to change that, say half it to 31 by 31 quads, you'll see the squares are become smaller. So what this is actually doing is the quads are the squares inside of each of these grid pieces. So if I made this larger, now these grid pieces are much larger, and there's a lot more quads or squares inside of these grid sections. So I want to do something a little bit smaller. So I'm actually going to set this to 63 by 63 quads. I'm going to under sections per component, or per component, you can basically double the size of it if you want to, or I guess quadruple 2 by 2 versus 1 by 1. We don't need to change that. And this is just how detailed you want your landscape to be. So the more quads in your landscape, if you've done anything in 3D modeling, if you've ever created a 3D mesh, quads are the actual uh, four-sided polygons that create a mesh. And that's what we're doing is we're creating a mesh landscape on the ground. So however many quads are in here, so if we want it to be really big and really fine and everything, these quads, there are a lot of quads here, right? There's a lot of squares. And that means that there's a lot more data that can be stored in the mesh, so you can make a lot finer detail for your mesh itself. But we are just going to be setting it at 63 by 63, a 1 by 1 section, and then the last thing we want to do is change the number of components. So this is the number of actual grid squares here. Currently, it's set to 8 by 8. We want to. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it a 4 by 4, just to make it a little bit more manageable for this. So this is our landscape space, and this is the bounds of our map currently. You can also change the resolution of your entire landscape itself. This will, it's set to 253 by 253, but if I wanted to um, double it, uh, then it will set the number of components um, comparatively to that. So I want to go back to 4 by 4, and that sets it back to 253 by 253. And basically, um, that's just creating, like, the higher the resolution, the more detail you can make in your landscape. All right, so if I hit the create button now, there you go. Now it has created um, our actual mesh, our actual floor, and it's given us our material that we asked for, that grass. And now you can see, if we go down into the grid, you can see the uh, different squares, quads, creating our level. So the next thing that we're going to do, now that we have done that, is we can, under the sculpt tab here, we have a bunch of different tools to sculpt our landscape. So if we wanted to say, and by default it's using our sculpt tool. What this is going to do is it's going to add or subtract height data to our mesh. So if I wanted to, I'm going to change my camera speed up a little bit to make this a little easier to navigate. If I wanted to say put a hill in this corner of the map, right? Um, I can use this brush the way that this is set up, and the size is probably fine. We might be able to make it a little bit bigger. We drag on our brush size here. We can increase the size of the brush. And if I just want to drag here, click and drag, and I have now created a bit of a hill. If I wanted to expand on that, say we want this to be larger than it is, then we just paint more. And you can kind of just, this is pretty free form, so you can kind of just paint and drag. And if things are too strong, if things aren't going aren't the right shape that you want them to be, you can change your tool strength. So if I drop my tool strength all the way down to, like, say 0.1 ish, now I'm getting a much smoother curve in my landscape. And if I drag it really high, now it's doing it a lot sharper. If I'm going to Control Z to go back a little bit. If I wanted to, say, change the shape of the landscape that I'm drawing, we can use our brush types here to change that. Um, Pattern brush will actually brush things. The alpha brush will use a mask to mask out parts of your landscape. So if you had, say, an alpha mask that you created in Photoshop that was a specific shape of the way that you wanted, like a river to look or whatever, you can use that and mask out sections of the landscape with that brush. And then finally, the I'd never use this brush, the landscape component brush, never use it. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But that will work with your entire component. And then the brush fallout, which is kind of the shape of the way that the brush creates columns. So if I use, say, this sharp fall off here, you can see that it has a sharp edge to it. If I were to use this tip looking thing, it's much shorter, smaller, and it kind of goes to a point a lot faster. Um, Back that a little bit. But this is all just so you can play around with these and get kind of really into fine detail about how you want things to look in your scene. If I say wanted to shore up this location here, I drop my tool strength, drop my brush, and we can kind of go more fine tune here of where we want to paint how we want this hill to look. Um, second thing we can do is that's increasing our height. But if we wanted to uh, decrease our height, whether we wanted to edit, fix an issue like say this one here, you hold shift and click, it will drag or it will push down um, on your landscape and give you a dip. If say we wanted to create a pond um, right here in the middle, right? And I'm going to do this with a bit of a bigger brush size so we have a much larger pond look. But if I hold shift and click down, kind of paint around, now I've created, it's a bit too strong actually. Oh, let's get a smoother brush fall off and paint this around a little bit. And then if we go to a sharper fall off and hold shift and push in, paint down, something like that. Now we have this um, dip in our map, and now it's again. If you look at the grid uh, here, this is below the grid, so it is under the ground level. But now this is a good spot for, say, a pond or a cave or something. Um, and this is all kind of just experimental, just whatever you like artistically, whatever you feel like you want to do. This is how you create landscapes. The next thing that we can do using some other tools um, is the erase tool. This is your height data, so you can say we didn't want this. Um, gee, every time calls me every time while I'm doing a thing. If we didn't want this, we can erase it by just painting over it, and now we are back to our normal or back to our flat height. I wanted to try. Maybe we want to try this again. Maybe we didn't like how deep it was or something, and we can do it that. Then we have the smooth tool. So the smooth tool, what this is going to do is it's going to smooth out our jagged parts uh, of our landscape. So all of those high peaks and everything, we can smooth them out and kind of make them more rolling. This is more good for detail work. If we wanted to say drop our brush size really into it, smooth out our tier, we can do that. Um, the flatten tool it sounds kind of self-explanatory, but it will flatten out sections based off of where your cursor is the height. So if I flatten here, I'll flatten everything out to that height. And then we can just kind of drag and paint, and it will give us kind of this, plateau cliff. Good for making paths and things in the landscape. Speaking of paths, we also have the ramp tool. So what this is going to do is this is going to create a ramp from one point to the next. So if I use my ramp tool and say I'll click here, now we have one point. Click say here, that's our second point. And if we click add ramp, it will create a ramp using that using those 2 points and the parameters we set inside here to mold the landscape to create it. So if we wanted to do this and make it a lot wider, and then we add the ramp, now it's a lot wider. And you can use that to create paths and things. You can also use it to create slopes up hills and mountains if you want to do that. You can also make the fall off a lot thinner, a lot wider, rather, to give you more of a rolling look, and then a lot thinner. You just want to make it more square. But do be careful with the way that you manipulate things with these tools, because here, now that we've done that, we're going to want to smooth out this section and this section to make it look more natural. And that's the ramp. You also have some lesser used tools, such as your erosion tool, which will actually allow you to paint erosion um, like from rainfall or from waterways. It's very good for using on like the inside of rivers and things like that to give you kind of a more natural look for how the water would have affected it over time. The hydro tool, I never used the hydro tool. I think this is, yeah, this creates kind of a actually, I'm not even, yeah, it creates a kind of the effect that rainfall has on an area. So you can flatten certain areas that have had a lot of rainfall and make kind of mud and stuff like that. I don't use that one very much because I use more of the sculpting and smoothing to create those effects. Anyway, yeah. So the last tool that we want to talk about is the paint tool, and this allows you to paint layers on top of your landscape. Um, this can matter more for when you have, so I can't actually show this in uh the default settings for the project because I haven't added any of them in. But basically you would create layers here and use different materials that are specifically called landscape layer materials, and then um, by clicking on each, I'll set this up so that it actually, oh oops, I guess it already exists. Hold up. Whatever. I don't worry about that. So once you have completely created the layer, then you can paint on top of your there we go. On top of your landscape to change kind of the material that is affecting your landscape in specific parts. So I can't show it, but if I wanted to say in this little dip here, creating a pond, if I wanted to make a um, gravel material inside the pond, say, I can paint specifically in that area, and it will paint the landscape while also giving me the correct material that I want on it. I wouldn't worry too much about this because, again, like I said, you need specific types of materials to affect that, and by default, those don't exist in the projects. So that's the basics uh, for material or for landscape painting. This is, again, it's all very kind of like how I like it's all just artistic. Like, this is, you're just going to have fun with it and create kind of the way you want your landscapes to look. I'm going to smooth this out here because um, the other good thing about using uh, actual like sunlight while you're doing this is you can see kind of how the sunlight is affecting our areas and whether or not we actually want to have these shadows. We smooth this out here, smooth this out here, um, and then you can create um, the right lighting effects as well by building it into your landscape. So that's landscaping, and the next thing that we want to talk about is foliage, which I'll be real quick about this too, because I don't think I have. Actually, hold on. I'll pause and make sure I have a foliage material to actually show this off. All right. There we go. I added it. So, no, there is not a default material or foliage material inside of the project for your third person templates. I'll discuss how to add these to your project, and I'll probably make it a separate video because add-ons and things are kind of complicated. But basically, what I did was I went ahead and added one in from the Fab, which is Unreal's marketplace. So I grabbed all these different things and put them into our project. So what you're looking for foliage is these. They're called static mesh foliage files. You'll see that at the bottom of the file here, and they'll be like this dark green. So if you open up your foliage mode right here, and then you will be by default under your paint tool, you can add foliage here and use that to paint your scenes with foliage. So I'm going to grab all three of these and drag them into our foliage palette. And now we have all three of these. And what this is going to do is it's going to randomly paint the foliage meshes onto our landscape based off of different factors. So the first thing you'll see is the brush size, which is kind of self-explanatory. If I wanted to increase or decrease the brush size, it'll affect how much the paint actually, how much of the area of the landscape the paint affects. The paint density is how dense the foliage is when you paint it. So I'll show you real fast. If I were to, I need to activate these, right? We need to actually activate our foliage meshes to be able to paint them. So as I paint, you can see it's going to have to prepare the compile shaders and stuff to actually show you the grass, but you can see how dense the grass is here that I painted. If I increase our paint density, then it will increase the density of the grass that we've painted. I'm going to undo that. We're going to drop this back down to 0.5. And we're going to drop this back down to 512. And then erase density is the exact opposite. So the denser your eraser, if you were trying to erase your paint, it'll affect more things within your brush. The next thing we want to check is, so this within your foliage pieces, you have a bunch of different things that you can use for foliage. You can use static meshes or landscapes, actual foliage files like these, and also different effects like translucent will paint like clear things like glass into your as foliage into your landscape. But if we go into our if we click on one of our foliage files inside of our palette, we can do a couple of different things here to affect how these are set up. So if we change our density within here, this will affect specifically the type of this specific foliage. So now if I paint, it's very dense, but very dense of just this type of foliage. If I go here and then add this to it, might be harder to see because of the double density. Maybe I should drop this down. Actually, in fact, let us just uncheck it. And now I've painted a different kind of foliage into our scene. But the denser your foliage that you want to paint, the higher this number, the more grass, or in some cases trees, things like that. It will paint rocks. All of that can be painted in the foliage painter. So what we actually want to do probably is set these to like 50. So we're a little bit less dense, but we have a bunch of different types of foliage. So that's totally fine. I'm going to go down to our eraser tool and erase what I just did. I didn't check it off. There we go. Erase that. Weird. Oh well. I guess I can just live with that. I don't know why it's not erasing those last couple of clumps. Anyway, so now that we have our paint tool and we have a bunch of different pieces of foliage that we want to paint, we can go ahead and start painting on our scene. Just a bunch of different foliage. And this will give us texture and, third dimension to our scene. So it's not just a paint on top of a what is essentially a flat object. Like this doesn't have any actual depth or height to it. And the foliage will give us more realistic look. These clumps of grass that I'm using are not the best for non-directional. As you can see, they're kind of all painted in a particular direction. You can change that. You can change that with your offsets and other tools down here, your pitch angle and things, to actually change the direction that your foliage is painting when it's placed on the actual landscape. But for this demonstration, all I'm doing is I just want to show you that you can paint around. And if I wanted to change, say I don't want to use this piece of foliage anymore, or maybe I only want to use the second one, if you uncheck these, then it will not paint the other pieces. So now I'm only painting one kind of grass. So if I had like a sea grass, or like a say I was doing like a wheat field or whatever, I could highlight just the wheat field, the wheat stalks, and then paint specifically that kind. Or if I was doing something inside of this when I wanted to make this a pond, and I want to use like, seagrass or seaweed or whatever, I can do that and paint in the bottom of just that type of foliage. Anyway, that's kind of our exterior landscape. Now from here, what we're going to do is kind of populate it with the components of our level, right? So one of the things that you can do if your level design is kind of more organic, so say everything is in a forest, or it's a mountain climbing thing, or there's a bunch of cliff sides and stuff, you can create that in landscape, and that can be your your level, your flow through your level. But if you wanted to create structures and things, say buildings, or fences and walls and things, you can do that through adding static meshes to your level. So now that we have a landscape, what we're going to do is I'm just going to create a quick house. I'm going to go to our selection mode, and I'm going to go back to our content folder. And what we're going to do is we are going to, I think it's under, no, that's the prototyping stuff, under starter content, architecture. Yeah, that's where it was. I'm going to create a really quick house right here in this, actually right over here in this corner. So the way that we do this is we can start with, we have our floor. If I drag it in, the floor, the base that these things are going to be set, when you drag things into your scene, you can see where the widget is. This is the origin point of the mesh, and that is going to be basically attached to the floor. So if you look over here in our details panel, you can see the location, the Z, the blue here, is set to 0. That means that it is right in line with our floor. A lot of times, if I drag, say, this in, a lot of times our origin point is in, oh gosh, I should probably slow down my camera. A lot of times our origin point is set to the bottom corner of our mesh. So then we drag things in and just drop them on the floor. It drops right kind of in the orientation we wanted. This piece didn't really do that, so I'm going to grab the floor, and what we're going to do is we're just going to drag it up. I'm going to change our snapping here to 1 to give us a bit more fine control of where we want to position this. And I'm just going to drag it. The other thing that we can do, and I'll show this in a different way, say we drag this in and it was kind of floating like this. If you hit page down, no, not page down, sorry, end, hit the end key on your keyboard, it'll drop it straight down to your floor. But anyway, so we have this little floor panel here, and I'm going to press Control and D to duplicate that, and then we're going to drag it over, and we're going to line it up. And it looks like it's a little off on that side, so drag it back 1. It's pretty even. And then this is how you build out like floors and platforms and things. You can use shift click to select multiple things, and then you can use Control D to duplicate them, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, so on and so forth. And then this will allow us to kind of just create our looks like that also kind of got dragged down 1. Create our, say, the platform, the floor of the building that we're creating. That's good enough. So now I'm going to take this door because I'm making a house, and I'm just going to drag this to where I want it here. And then up. And again, I can hit the N key to drop this right onto the floor. and say that's where we want it. Okay, and then next, now that we have our door or our door frame there, next we're going to drag in a wall. I guess we'll use this and we'll scale it. All right, so we drag in our wall here, and then using our W key to hit our move tool, we're going to move it so that it's lined up right there. We're going to drag it up right there. And then if we hit R, we can scale this because we're going to have to scale it out. And actually, this is why I like to, I'm going to actually, let's try 0.1. This is why I like to remove the snapping for scale. Yeah. Because scaling can get kind of very fine. And the closer that you zoom into a area, the more fine-tuned, oh my gosh, more fine-tuned control you have on how the how much the widget itself actually scales. Next thing we're going to do is I need to drag this down so that it is more or less in line there. It's a little off. We'll make it less off by dragging on our right here on our X scale, and we'll scale it to there. Oop, no, that's wrong. I think it's 75%. Yeah, there we go. Now that that's in line, now we can take this, we can duplicate it. And drag it over here. And we'll drag it right in line there. And then forward one. Oh, back one actually. There. And then we hit our N key, it'll drop to the floor. And then we'll scale it down so that it fits the end of our floor. Very close. Drag for a little bit more fine tune. There we go. And there's the one wall of our house. Next thing we'll do is I'll actually just duplicate this wall, and then we'll drag it back here. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag it to this corner and here, and then we're going to scale it out. Oh gosh, that was a very large scaling. There we go. Drag the scale tool here, and we'll get it all lined up. And there's second wall, and then we'll add some windows. I think this is the right scale, 400 by 300. We'll rotate this 90 degrees, drag it here, and I'm going to put the window right up against this wall. Boom. And basically, I'm not gonna do this in real time. Maybe I'll speed it up or do it before and after. But basically, this is how you build objects. These are what's called modular pieces, so they're kind of designed to like be attached to each other. And if you go, if you find, say, you're using a different asset pack or you have a bunch of different custom models, you can build structures like this. You can also build structures completely as their own static meshes. And I don't know if there is, I don't think so, not in the base content. But like you can create a model in a 3D, a 3D object or 3D modeling program like Maya or Blender, and then just import it and scale it to wherever you need it. But the idea is that if you're, so I was building a house here, but if you wanted to say build a maze or a series of walls, like a fence or whatever, the first thing that you would want to do is do this simply with these blocking elements. It's called blocking out a scene. and you kind of just do your basic geometry, and then you add your detail to it. I might do a separate thing about blocking out specifically, because it is kind of cool what you can do with it. But the idea is, say I wanted to over here, say I wanted to do a I don't know, a maze, right? Um, what I would start with is, if we add a cube to our scene here, what I would start with is I'd take this cube, and I would just be like, all right, so we're going to make this a little bit thinner and a lot longer and a lot taller, right? And then we drag it up and we hit N to drop it to the floor. And then say this is the wall of our maze. If I were to, it's actually fine. If I were to, looking at it overhead, use this basic shape and duplicate it and move it around, scale it to different sizes and shapes and everything, and say this is the way that our scene is like starting, right? Like, this is the block out, this is the basic shape of everything. And then, kind of similar to the prototype projects that the map drawing and stuff that you've done, you can do it in 3D objects, and then take this from here and add the detail after the fact. Whether you have your own meshes that you want to use for these pieces, or whether you have I'm going to scale this down a little bit and drag this over here, so that we have a way through, or whether you have custom assets that you're creating for these walls, these pieces, whatever design you're doing. This is the block out, and it's similar to creating a house like that over there, but you're kind of modeling it from the ground up, and then doing the details after the fact. So, for instance, if I say this was my block out, right, and this is what I came up with, the shape of my maze, lack of a better term. This is a cube, and if I wanted to, I can change the static mesh. So, say I wanted to change the static mesh to the if we go back to our starter content here, if I want to change this into a window wall, well, I can do that by just dragging this into our static mesh. Granted, you have to make sure that the origin point's the same, but the idea, I guess, is that now I've switched it to a different mesh, and I can. Oh, interesting. I can edit that, whichever mesh I want to use in real time while I'm editing, or while I'm creating the thing in the editor. The other cool thing that you can do actually is, say you wanted to sculpt out from this wall, right, a specific shape of the wall, right, or shape from this entire object. You can export these objects out, and then import them into a 3D modeling software and do your details in the software, and then re-import it and drop it right into the static mesh thumbnail here, and it'll drop right in place. Anyway, this is a much longer video than I thought it was going to be. If people are interested in some of these like higher advanced ideas, things that you want to see, let me know. I can put together some additional videos and things on that. But I wanted to show off how landscaping worked. I wanted to show off kind of like the basics of blocking out stuff. And the last thing I want to show, sorry, the recording split there. The last thing I want to show is kind of doing an interior scene, which is a little bit simpler than doing landscaping, because you don't have to worry about landscaping. But I created this level here, this interior scene level, and the basics. I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything except our environment assets are directional light, exponential height fog, sky atmosphere, and volumetric cloud. And the cool thing about doing interior stuff is you can basically just skip the landscaping and just go straight into blocking out. So I have a cube here, and I want to make this cube long and wide, and now I have a floor. And then from here, I can continue to block out, add additional shapes, another cube here, make this, say, a column, right? And you can create the map, the interior design map here without having to worry about landscaping. The only thing you have to be aware of is that whatever your the bounds of the interior of your level, if it goes outside of that, then there's nothing out there, right? If you go off of this platform, you go into nothing. So you just want to make sure that you're aware of that when you're creating this. The other thing that you want to be aware of is lighting an interior scene. So say normally you use the natural light from like if you're doing an exterior scene, to use the natural light from the sun to light your scene. But if you're inside of a scene like this, then you need to add lighting to actually be able to visualize, to see things, right? So if we add and we go down to our lights and our stuff to add here, if we add a spotlight will do kind of exactly what it looks like here. It'll create a cone of light in the direction. So if I move this in the direction of the object itself, and then you can move it wherever you want to. If we rotate it, I'll rotate it around. We can rotate it. So that's a spotlight. And if we wanted to, say, increase the radius of this cone, if you go down to the details panel and go to our inner and outer cone angles, we can increase the outer cone angle, which will give us a wider cone. If we increase the inner cone angle, this will give us kind of a more intense interior light, and it'll have a fall off to effect to the exterior cone. So you can get some kind of artificial looking light effectively with this. And you can mess with other options here. Say if we wanted to make this light blue, you can change the color of the light there. But the idea is that you can use spotlights to take the place of actual directional light in your scene. So like if you had fluorescent or not fluorescent, fluorescent lights along your ceiling, you can use the spotlight to create that effect. If you had, say, a lamp here on this column, if you wanted to add a point light to that, so a point light will give you 360-degree light everywhere. So you can say there was a lamp here, you can drag this point light onto this column where the lamp is, and then affect basically through your light tools here. You can affect attenuation radius, which will give you kind of how much that light bleeds through in that kind of spherical look. And then you can change, say, the color and the source radius. And then the soft source radius will give you kind of a fall off and soften up your light. So that's just some quick, that's how you do some interior lighting stuff. I will say, again, if anybody wants to see some more advanced things about this, I can do that. Just let me know. But in the scope of what we're doing in this class, you'll want to kind of do blocking out stuff with your shapes in interior designs, and also do landscaping for your exteriors to create your levels. The last thing that I'm going to do it in another video at the end of this, is show you how to add some assets to your scenes or to your projects, so that you can do more than just use the prototype stuff from the starter content. So yeah.